Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 9th season of LiterARTure. Shocking. Can you believe we're still together after 9 seasons? Me neither. I'm Cindy Edelman.
And I take a lot of medication.
And you are?
Oh. There's a reason why my nonprofit's called Searching for Identity. I'm Stacey Goldring.
And we're thrilled to be back at Terry Concert Hall, aka LiterARTure's. I had Taj Mahal, but we saw Tim Cost earlier, so I'll call it the Cost Mahal. And are most grateful to be here, courtesy of our friends Stephanie and Tim Cost, who have thoughtfully shared this gorgeous space with us. And to our devoted dears in the front row, Julia and John Taylor, devoted dears. They have written, and they believe in the mission of Searching for Identity, and have generously underwritten the series for a 3rd year. So, for those of you who are new to LiterARTure, Searching for Identity is an umbrella under the Searching for Identity is the umbrella that LiterARTure falls under. And it is the nonprofit that Stacey founded 8 years ago to secure that the important work she does with 2nd and 3rd generation children of Holocaust survivors gets told. So it's very important to me personally, and certainly we appreciate your being here and supporting Searching for Identity through this season of 4 lectures. I'd also like to thank our volunteers, the ever wonderful Marlene Sussman, Judy Israel, and our newest volunteer, Jenny Calderwood. So thank you all. I guess they're probably still sitting outside, but you can tell them they were thanked. And of course, to Lisa DeLuma. She changed her name. I have to get used to it. So Lisa DeLuma, we could literally not do this work without you. And we continue to be inspired by you, our audience. Your generosity is deeply and gratefully appreciated, particularly your attendance at these talks and at the showing of Stacey's documentary film, award-winning documentary. Some of you were touched by the film by underwriting Trace's showings in 2 different communities outside of Florida, and another has given a beautiful gift to Searching for Identity without even being asked. Thank you for these thoughtful gestures. They mean a great deal. Now, on to business. Our theme this season is influencers in art and literature. We'll explore the concept of darkness, and believe me, there's a lot of darkness today. Luckily, it's a nice day out. You can go out in the sunlight afterwards. By looking at the paintings of the 17th century Baroque master, Caravaggio, and contrasting him with a few artists who adopted his dynamic, dramatic style. And Stacey will open the Pandora's box that Patricia Highsmith clearly sprung from, discussing her masterpiece, the talented Mr. Ripley. So buckle up for that. Take it away, dear friend. We can't wait to hear about the cold genius that was Patricia Highsmith. And just get a load of, oh, you've already changed the slide.
I changed it?
I just want to say, don't you think Patricia Highsmith resembles a Medusa, but you've already changed the slide?
We pair them so well. Probably no one else on earth.
Seriously, I think if Patricia Highsmith had known Caravaggio, she would have written a book about him, and she would have killed him off in a Mississippi Minute.
Yes, she would have killed him too. Yes, you know, although it's never. Hello, I'm so happy to be here. Okay. Although it is never ever a good idea to explain an artist or an author's work by analyzing their personal lives, we can't help but want to know more about artists whose work we admire. The writer behind the talented Mr. Ripley, well, all I can say is what follows ranks as one of the most disturbing, creepiest, repulsive, biographical summaries that I've ever presented about a brilliant, masterful writer. So like Cindy said, strap in. You picked her. I did. Just to annoy you. Okay. Patricia Highsmith was born in Fort Worth, Texas in 1921. She revealed that, encouraged by her biological father, her mother tried to terminate her pregnancy, by drinking turpentine.
Just sink, let that sink.
I wish that was the worst to come. At age 10, Patricia learned that the man that she thought was her father wasn't. Divorce, remarriage, and a tumultuous upbringing are great descriptions for this writer's childhood. Her later feelings of rejection, identity, trust, abandonment are later expressed in her writings. As they say, write about what you know. And speaking of her early life, Highsmith said, quote, "My life is a mistake. It's a contradiction." Yeah, don't feel too sorry for her. Okay. Fast forward to after her graduation from Barnard College. She worked in the Bloomingdale's toy department where she observed strangers obsessively, remembering their addresses. Remember the old charge cards? Remembering their addresses, following them when they left the store to where they lived, and would just watch. If this sounds vaguely familiar, it could be because you saw the 2015 film Carol, based on Patricia Highsmith's 1952 book called The Price of Salt, which she wrote under the pseudonym Claire Morgan. This is another clue to Patricia Highsmith's personal life of hiding her identity. Writing stories for comic books earned her a respectable, decent living after she graduated, and this was her source of income for 6 years, so she was able to afford her own place in New York. In 1950, her first novel debuted, Strangers on a Train, later purchased and filmed by Alfred Hitchcock. She hated the film, and I wish we could just talk about that animosity, but there's so much more, so we won't go any further there. 5 years later, The Talented Mr. Ripley was published. Her literary success continued to grow. In 1963, our author moved abroad, living in England, France, and finally settling in Switzerland. Patricia Highsmith wrote an impressive 22 novels. Today, of course, we're going to focus on the 1955 classic, The Talented Mr. Ripley. This was the first in her, what we call Ripleyad, like Iliad. This was the first of her Ripleyad series, including Ripley Underground, Ripley's Game, The Boy Who Followed Ripley, and Ripley Underwater. She also wrote short stories and nonfiction. Her work is translated into over 30 languages. So for 3 decades, she was winning high critical acclaim, and she was well received in Europe. But over here in the US, mums her. No one knew from her. So why? For one thing, like the title of our series, Breaking the Mold, she was breaking the mold. And Europe was quicker to adapt to her somewhat dark writing style. Furthermore, she didn't promote her books. She never visited the US after she left. Plus, her writing style defied a certain category, which is difficult when you're trying to sell books. Patricia Highsmith, in fact, did not become a household name here in the United States until after her death in 1955. It was with the popularity of the 1999 Anthony Minghella film, The Talented Mr. Ripley, which unleashed a hungry new U.S. audience who eagerly then consumed her re-release books. Or like me, you eagerly consumed because you enjoy fawning over Jude Law.
Just wait, there's more Jude Law coming.
I promise. The greatest source, though, of Patricia Highsmith's own perceived exclusion was her lesbianism, which added to her sense of alienation. She resisted any public discussion of her private self. She didn't even claim the book Price of Salt, which I mentioned earlier, until 1991. So if my math is right, Dan, that's 39 years she didn't claim that she wrote that book. And she wasn't exactly a nice person. One mentor described her as a mean, cruel, hard, unlovable, unloving human being. I could never penetrate how any human being could be so relentlessly ugly. But her books, brilliant. Known for drinking heavily, often gin or whiskey, starting early in the morning, she would sometimes write with a bottle at her side until she went to sleep at night. Anecdotes include Anecdotes include setting her hair on fire at a dinner party and throwing a dead rat at a guest through a window. She was a real rebel rouser.
Even Caravaggio didn't set his hair on fire.
This beauty also broke the mold, merging real life with her fiction. She had a multitude of lovers, but stables, plural, of lovers, mostly women, though a man popped in every so often. And I thought you would get that pun. And all the rehearsing, I get nothing. It's such a good pun. All of her relationships were intertwined with obsession, jealousy, longing, difficulty. She would sabotage relationships. Surprise, surprise, she wasn't vindictive. And once she conquered, she became disillusioned. She'd also drug her lovers and then leave them. I wish I could share her quotes about sex, but we don't have time for that now. But they're really good. Two of her deepest relationships were with Jewish women. Now, I just want you to put a pin in that because we will circle back. Just trust me. I'm building tension. It's storytelling. Okay. So I want you just to put a pin in that, and now think about this. Not only would she end her relationships in real life, okay, but she would murder them as fictionalized versions in her books. That's bad. One of her exes said this, quote, "After we broke up, she murdered me very brutally." She should say really, but very brutally in The Cry of the Owl, with a knife, several times. That's your 15 minutes of fame, right? You can even, at one point, you could take a tour of New York City of all the places where she bedded and then offed her lovers, fictional and otherwise. They say that writing is therapy. Perhaps her commitment to writing kept her from committing murder in real life. We'll never know. So, Cindy, you may ask...
This one thing Caravaggio did murder.
You may ask, did she have any long-term relationships? Aren't you pondering that?
Not really, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, I would answer you, dear friend, that yes, she loved and was influenced by certain authors. It won't surprise you that when I look for authors that Highsmith admired, Frances Hodgson Burnett's the author of The Secret Garden, and Lucy Maud Montgomery, who wrote Anne of Green Gables, did not come up on my list. Highsmith's influencers were the opposite. Jack London, his Heart of Darkness main character, Charlie Marlowe, is frequently compared to Tom Ripley, who unfortunately you will soon get to meet. Robert Louis Stevenson, Bram Stoker, as in Dracula, John Ruskin, who was not kind to women, Louisa May Alcott, fun fact, she hated Little Women, more on that another time, Kafka and Dostoevsky, especially Crime and Punishment, and her love of the genre of abnormal psychology. These are all real pick-me-ups, right? So that's who she loved. Now, onto those she loathed. Up to this point, to describe Patricia Highsmith as a complex person is a gracious way of portraying the truth about this incredible author. An author whose books I admire and I love. But she is a certified anti-Semite, bigot, racist, and all those other words that you can conjure in your brain. And I am not being a fragile flower. As you well know, I'm Jewish. So I have grown a certain awareness and great cautious response when I sense that insidious trait of hate. Even in a book, my eyes are alerted if I should see the letter J coming up in the next sentence or the next paragraph. I prepare myself for that ugly slur or sentiment, and then the sucker punch that always follows and needs to be swallowed away. And I've been that way since I was little. Well, I'm still short for some people in this room. She was a prolific writer of diaries. That's how we know. Well, that's not all how we know. Reportedly having over 8,000 pages of handwritten notebooks in multiple languages on thoughts of loneliness, character, plot development, loves and hatreds. According to a 2023 article in the Daily Mail, Toni Rennell says, and I quote, a self-confessed Jew hater, she adopted 40 aliases to announce Jewish influence and declared that at 6 million dead, the Holocaust had fallen short and should be called the semi-cost because it only did half the job. He goes on. See, don't feel bad about the turpentine, okay? She would cynically refer to Holocaust Inc., spelling out her uncompromising and pernicious view that the murder of 6 million had been turned into an industry for which the Jews benefited. Her pro-Palestine and anti-Israel politics were rooted in this hatred, and her letters to the editor are public proof of this, if the diaries don't do it for you. Nor did her racism stop there, because she was ecumenical in her hatred. Apparently, she also did not like Latinos, Koreans, Indians, Mexicans, Catholics, evangelical Christians. Rennell goes on to say, the complete pack. And also, she hated Black people. She blamed any poverty on Black people. So this is probably a really good time to take a breath and talk about snails. Yeah.
I tried so hard to get her to drop the snails.
She did. Yes, snails. She loved them. She loved them. She wrote about them. She raised them as pets. Reportedly, hundreds. I'm loving the looks on your faces. They were her plus one because she would take them with her socially. So I don't know what's in your purse or in your pocket, okay? But she would take them. That's the Highsmith lore. She would carry them with her, dozens, okay? She smuggled them into France, allegedly in her handbag, or depending on your source, a cottage cheese carton.
You had to say that too.
They did not have TSA back then, clearly, and I would classify a snail as a very different kind of emotional support animal. And I'm not making this up. You can check my sources, including the biographer Andrew Wilson, who wrote Beautiful Shadow, and Joan Shenkar's The Talented Miss Highsmith. Highsmith saw her own weaknesses in her characters. Yeah, she may have identified with their guilt, but she admired them. She was exhilarated by their many transgressions in a creepy way that will become even more apparent when I share the Ripley story with you, is that she would sign her correspondence as Ripley. But lest you think that Highsmith has too much darkness, remember remember that that she only ever committed deadly sins legally, artistically, in her writing. Whereas Cindy will now discuss a bad boy who executed his deadly sins on canvas and tennis court.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. What makes, you going to do my slides?
I
Thank you
certainly
so
will.
much. What makes Michelangelo Merici Caravaggio such a delicious subject to begin this year's theme of influencers in art? How did this young man from the town of Caravaggio, so, like Leonardo was from Vinci, Caravaggio was his hometown in northern Italy. How did he make his mark in the 17th century during the period that followed the High Renaissance that is called the Baroque? That Caravaggio became one of the greatest influencers in art history is one of those stories one couldn't make up if one tried. Growing up near Milan, trained in the city that had been home to Leonardo when he worked for Ludovico Sforza, the Duke of Milan, and according to the Metropolitan Museum, where there was a tradition in Milan of the region's distinctive emphasis, on the observation of the natural world. So keep the idea of the observation of the natural world is important. Caravaggio quickly made his way to Rome, which was the center of High Renaissance art at the time, and where his prodigious talent was discovered by two very well placed cardinals who were busy decorating chapels and churches and building up their own personal collections. And what were the qualities that distinguished Caravaggio's style that branded him? I mean, he was branded a rebel, a blasphemist, a heretic, a disruptor. Could it be that he found beauty in the unexpected and the ordinary, the imperfect, the elderly, and death? And make no mistake about it, he was a tortured soul who often merged love the word erotic content with violence in his paintings, and he actually truly lived a life of pain and suffering. Now, the image on the screen comes from 1598. It's one of his earliest works, and it was made as a commemorative shield. Sometimes it's called a parade shield, and it was actually found in the hand of a life-size equestrian figure in Rome. And it was a gift from one of the cardinals named Del Monte to a Medici. And it's instructive that this oil and canvas on wood is not in a traditional, painting style. It's because it's round. I mean, rondelles were painted in the Renaissance, at the 15th and 16th century, round paintings, but this was actually painted to be, a shield. And the face on the shield is none other than the Medusa, who was one of the dangerous Gorgons, monsters from Greek mythology. If you remember, the Medusa, if she looked at you, you would turn to stone. Not exactly. Maybe Patricia Highsmith could have used a look at her, I don't know. But anyway, what made Caravaggio's work unique is that the face that we see is not feminine. And instead, it's what we would describe as androgynous. It's shown in a decapitated state with blood like gushing out of its neck, along with the accompanying horror-filled or terror-stricken eyes and screams, just penetrating screams. You've got the head of wriggling snakes, because the Medusa's had a head of snakes, adds to the sense of drama and fright. And one of the hallmarks of Caravaggio is that he seems to suspend action, as if something has just happened or possibly going to happen. And we certainly get that frozen in time moment here. Early on in Caravaggio's career, we see the propensity for him to paint himself as a victim of a crime, even though he certainly perpetrated lots of them. As the face you see in this is his. So here he's painted a self-portrait as the Medusa. And he has a fascination with decapitation and also with castration throughout his career. So you're going to see several times today where he paints himself decapitated. If you go to the next one, speaking of decapitation, the next painting is David with the head of Goliath from about 1609, so much later toward the end of his life. By the way, there are discrepancies in terms of when he was born. Was it 1571? Was it 1573? But we do know he died in 1610, and he was only about 37 or 38 years old. So before we do a deep dive into this work, we need to address his style, which was important to the Baroque, and his important contributions, which influenced many artists after. And here you see two essential Baroque dramatic lighting characteristics. One is called chiaroscuro. That literally means in Italian, light dark. And chiaroscuro was begun earlier in the High Renaissance by Leonardo. You see the use of it in the Mona Lisa, for instance. And it's but Caravaggio takes the idea of contrasting light and dark, and he makes it way more emotional, emphasizing mood, and for the sake of dramatic impact. And then the other lighting term that was really refined and developed and refined by Caravaggio is called, it comes from the word tenebroso, the Italian term tenebroso, which means literally in the shadowy manner. And when you see his work, it appears as though the figures literally like just emerge from the darkness. His backgrounds are so dark, and that also contributes to this sense of dramatic theatrical lighting, if you will. I mean, and that's another one of the characteristics of the Baroque. It was very dramatic. It was very theatrical. You'll see curtains and in swag shape that give you the sense that this is a theatrical performance. So in addition to the dramatic lighting, his game-changing contributions are that he secularizes religious and classical subject matter. So you're going to see, for instance, how he paints the Virgin Mary, reputed to be a woman that had been just picked up out of the River Tiber in Rome. And instead of using a beautiful Madonna-like figure that Raphael might have painted, he uses regular people to emphasize their humanity. And of course, at the time when he did this, it was considered blasphemous. And that leads to another aspect of him as an artist. He was one of the very first artists to be censored because of these crude and non-traditional manner in which he painted. So he used common people as models. And another thing he did that was not used before him was that he wished to bring the viewer, that is us, as close as possible to the edge of the picture plane, inviting us into the scene and inviting us to be part of the work itself, making it more immediate and making it more personal. And he did this, of course, because so many people at the time were illiterate, so art is used to teach a moral or teach a story. And as I said, he was one of the first artists to be censored. His work was criticized. It was too realistic. It was too offensive. It was challenging in terms of standards of propriety. But here's the thing: his work was an art of contrast. You have realistic people from everyday life, and juxtaposed with these dramatic theatrical poses. So back to David. During the Renaissance, if you recall, David was, of course, a beloved subject, and even the town of Florence had adopted David as their icon. And so he was beloved, primarily seen as a symbol of heroism over his Philistine tormentor Goliath. He was also seen as a symbol of triumph of good over evil, and as well as a symbol of Christ versus Satan. But this David that's on the screen is not your triumphant Renaissance David. It's pretty difficult to get a more gory work than this one that Caravaggio painted. Gory details, the tenebrism, the stark background, the chiaroscuro, the very harsh lighting. Notice how David's face is, half of his face is in the shadows, half of it's in light. Goliath's eyes are half open, as is his open mouth. You can even see how bad teeth. He didn't have Saul Brotman as his dentist, I gotta tell you. His eyes are half open, and he emits this scream. It's like maybe he's just read one of Patricia Highsmith's books. And blood is pouring from his neck. Some interpretations say that he may be seeing his decapitated body at the moment of when the sword, sliced his neck off from his head. And here's something really interesting. Caravaggio's David looks like he feels sorry for his victim. He has pity for him. And as I've mentioned several times, and many of you have been with us since the beginning, art historians love nothing more than reading psychological meanings into Caravaggio's works of art. Some think that the figure of David was Caravaggio's studio assistant, and I said lover, but I got chided by Stacey, so I'll say paramour. A strong case for that argument is the obvious positioning of the sword conveniently between David's legs, pointing down at an angle toward the lower half of his body.
Is that you, or is that scholarship? I knew it. Go ahead.
And if complicated psychological mysteries are your thing, which of course they are, you will like learning that the head of Goliath is none other than a self-portrait of the artist himself. I mean, really, he had a problem, right? We could spend the rest of today analyzing his peculiarities. He gives Patricia Highsmith a run for her money. With some artists, we must separate their personal lives from their art. My youngest daughter is also into art history. I was talking to her about that very topic, about how do you handle it when you love the work of an artist, but they're like I was talking about Michael Jackson at the time, and she goes, "Mom, you just have to separate the personal with their work. I mean, I'm not going to stop listening, but I'm not going to stop really being a very big fan of Caravaggio. So too with Caravaggio, who was marked by reckless personal conduct. I mean, he was just such a bad boy. I'm barely scratching the surface with him today. His bouts with the police were well known, as he was arrested multiple times. He had a rap sheet as long as Stacey and my arm combined. He used coarse language. He was a heavy drinker. He was a sword-carrying bully. And in those days, you needed a permit. Too bad. Well, never mind. I won't even go down. I won't even talk about guns today. But for those in Rome, you needed a permit to carry a sword. But he would just completely ignored that. And he would carry a sword under his cape, and he would run around marauding young men, and they were just really bad. He was always on the run from the law. By the time he was 21, he had wounded a police officer, forcing Caravaggio to leave Milan. A few years later, and I swear I'm not making this up, and this is a fact. When he was in Rome, he threw a plate of artichokes, Jerusalem artichokes, in a waiter's face because they were not brought to his satisfaction. That's what kind of a prima donna he was. And many of you already know about his ill-fated, really just unbelievable, but again, true, tennis match betting troubles. After the artichoke fiasco in 1606, Caravaggio had lost a bet, a wager on a tennis game against Ranuccio Tomassoni, resulting in a very nasty fight. Nasty that Caravaggio was injured, and then he ran his sword through Tomassoni, and he murdered him. The art story says, quote, Caravaggio pierced his opponent's femoral artery with his dueling sword, causing him to bleed to death in a short time. The nature, we said it was going to be a dark day today. The nature of this injury close to Tomassoni's groin, this is of course why I'm telling you all this, may suggest that Caravaggio intended to wound his opponent sexually. Now we don't know that for a fact, of course, but he did murder him, or wound him. Wounds were meaningful in the honor culture of the time. So, for example, a facial wound might be inflicted to avenge an insult or reputation or a loss of face, while a genital wound or attempted castration might mark a dispute over a woman, end quote. Now we know that wasn't the case here. Fleeing to Naples, to Sicily, to Malta, becoming a fugitive, seeking a papal pardon, eventually receiving said pardon, however unwell to make his return to Rome, dying on the beach at the age of 37 or 38 from speculative causes. The majority of our historians think from malarial fever. Historically, Caravaggio was on the run when at the time this painting of David with the head of Goliath was painted. One theory is that he painted this work for one of the Roman cardinals who had the power to give him a pardon. Why would he paint himself as a beheaded man? Was he begging for mercy? Was his fascination with death to be his obsession with his own mortality? Or the fact that he tended to highlight bitter and unpleasant aspects of life in all of his paintings? As an aside, how serendipitous that this painting is featured in the Netflix limited series Ripley. Ripley goes in the series. Tom Ripley goes to Rome's Borghese Gallery soon after he commits a deadly sin. Speaking of Mr. Ripley, let's hear from Stacey about the talented Tom Ripley.
Thank you so much, Cindy. That was beautiful. Well, it was gory, but thank you. I feel much smarter now. What now follows is an uncomfortable summary of Patricia Highsmith's most famous book, The Talented Mr. Ripley. Now, if you've not heard of it, trust me, this book, vacant of heroes and void of morality, has legions of fans. Just take a look at this Etsy listing for a first edition, $15,000. And this listing, I don't even think it's from a week ago. Like I just pulled it off. Anyway, what I so enjoy about our time together is the connections that we can make with one another through art and literature. In last season's literature series, if you were with us, we talked about loose salons. And Cindy and I took a look at a book called The Book of the Courtier by Baldassare Castiglione, which took me several months to learn how to pronounce, thanks to you. But I think I've got it down.
You have it down.
Thank you. And we showed you, during that presentation, we showed you this exact luscious slide. This term, sprezzatura, this is needed tonic. This is what we need. Sprezzatura, as we explained, is the essence of being a successful gentleman without putting any effort into it. It just comes to you naturally. Of course, all of us here are loaded with sprezzatura. It takes no work at all, right? So if you, I don't know if it's serendipity or divine Jude Law intervention, but you may recognize this still from the 1999 Magella film, The Talented Mr. Ripley. So for today's series, which is Darkness Lurks, this connecting image serves as the perfect calling card to understand one of the main malevolent driving forces behind our main character, Tom Ripley. It is his desire to possess the sprezzatura-esque identity of Dickie Greenleaf. The Talented Mr. Ripley is described as a suspenseful psychological thriller, and it follows Tom Ripley, a man who has probably shoved under his own mattress a dog-eared stolen library copy, the Book of the Courtier. And from the outside, Tom is a small-time grifter. He is a ne'er-do-well, a swindler, an imposter, and always in and out of jobs. Quote, Tom had always thought he would like to be somebody else, somebody rich, someone handsome, someone talented. So let's take a look at Tom now. And this is the latest Ripley from Netflix. This is Andrew Scott doing a fabulous job portraying Tom Ripley.
He's pretty easy on the eyes, too.
Oh, yes. Okay. So he's seated at a bar stool in a seedy New York bar. We know he's pondering his next Slip and Jimmy scam, his eyes stirring, plotting, and he looks uncomfortable here. Could it be due to his conscious guilt, of guilt for his recent shenanigans, such as impersonating an IRS officer in some cruel embezzlement scheme? No, not really. Tom does not mind stealing. Quote, Tom had once tried to tell himself it was wrong to steal, but he had come to the conclusion that it was not, unquote. He just doesn't want to get caught because he's too smart for the likes of us. But sitting in this bar, he feels he's being watched. And he's right. Now imagine he's approached by an older man, could be Tom's father's age, if Tom had known his father. Suspicious that he's been caught, Tom feels the world closing in on him. How could he get caught, he thinks, by this old cop? But his luck's about to change. Herbert Greenleaf finally approaches and asks one singular question that truly is the crux of the book. Pardon me, are you Tom Ripley? Tom, relieved that his true dark self has not been revealed, affirms it's him. Mr. Greenleaf goes on. I wasn't quite sure if you were Tom Ripley. This is so delicious if you know the book. I wasn't so sure. I've seen you once before. Didn't you come up to the house once with Richard? Tom doesn't recognize this man from Adam, but he sniffs fresh blood. Herbert Greenleaf is a wealthy man who's been trying to track down his son Dickie. Mr. Greenleaf explains that his wayward artist child is to return from Italy for what we would call a way overextended gap year and join his family's shipbuilding business. Convinced through Ripley's trail of lies that he and Dickie are friends from Princeton, Tom never attended a day of class at Princeton. Tom takes up Mr. Greenleaf's offer to go and convince his son to return home. The goodness of good fortune has fallen into the lap of the vacuous Ripley, instantaneously calculating his present circumstances, which I would sum up as down and out. He accepts this mission. Like a chameleon shedding his skin, Tom molts, sails first class on a transatlantic crossing by sea, travels by rail across Europe to Montebello, Italy, in search of Dickie. His migration to Europe from America is a rebirth worthy of a new hat. Quote, he was starting a new life. Goodbye to all the secondhand people in New York he'd hung around and let hang around him. A clean slate, unquote. Now on the ship, Highsmith implants foreshadowing of Tom's subsuming new identities. It's a brief scene, and it brings us up to the ship's library. We see Tom inquiring about a Henry James title that he's never read. He only knows to ask for it because Mr. Greenleaf spoke of it. Alas, the library does not contain a copy of The Ambassadors. Yet Highsmith's nod to those familiar with the book's plot about an American going abroad on a rescue mission will enjoy this reference. But in the book, Tom doesn't ask for the ambassadors. He asks for the ambassador, singular, foreboding. He's co-opting the original. This Henry James side quest reflects Highsmith's ability to adapt a classic, take an expatriate story, and make it her own. But back to our story. Tom's quest to find Dickie is rewarded with a vision of splendor displayed on the beach. Dickie, in all his Grecian statuesque physique, is taking in the dolce vitae, sunning himself. And Tom's attraction to Dickie is immediate and uncoils forth. The introductions may be awkward, but unabated, Tom pursues invitations for a push for friendship. The sexual tension between the two men is taut with mystery, and eager to impress Dickie, who asks Tom if he plans to stay for a while he's here in Italy. Ripley, who has no sense of self, recites his talents, revealing his psychopathic prowess. I can do any number of things: forge a signature, fly a helicopter, handle dice, personate practically anyone. Shall I go on? Unquote. But Tom runs into a snag to capture Dickie in the way of Marge. Marge Sherwood is in love with Dickie Greenleaf, but settles to be his patient lapdog. A competitor for Dickie's attention and affection, Tom first aims his bullseye on her. With succinct, deliberate strokes, the Marge problem is solved by making her feel like nothing more than a +1. Building underneath is growing magnetism in everything Dickie. It's the green-eyed monster, Tom's insatiable jealousy of Dickie's pedigree, his sprezzatura, and it grows in unabated pandemic fashion. In one episode, Tom is literally caught in Dickie's bedroom, wearing Dickie's clothes, impersonating Dickie. And he's saying, "Marge, you must understand, I don't love you." Tom sits in front of the mirror. He uses Dickie's voice, his higher pitch and emphasized words. Then, examining his reflection, he begins to realize how much he looks like Dickie Greenleaf. When he gets interrupted, "What are you doing?" Dickie enters the room, scaring Tom, who here in the 1999 film, Tom, played by Matt Damon, hides behind the mirror. So we see a very Alfred Hitchcockian cinematography, use of mirrors. So we see our Dickie Greenleaf in the mirror scolding him. "I wish you'd get out of my clothes. Shoes too? Are you crazy?" And then he later goes on to say, "I am not queer. I don't know if you have that idea, but I am not." Tom denies the assumption, but he's not discombobulated, worried he's ruined the friendship and failed Dickie. He wonders about his own sexuality. Highsmith never explicitly defines their sexual preferences. This theme of ambiguity, classic Highsmith. Now, I would have shown Tom the nearest exit, and I would suggest to him that he get help with his boundaries. But Tom is not deterred. Rather now, fueled by jealousy, he begins to steal things out of Dickie's flat. And he starts affecting his mannerisms, his affectations. Quote, "In Dickie's eyes, Tom saw nothing more than he would have if he looked into a hard, bloodless surface of a mirror." This synthesization of the two is baked in by the oppressive heat of the Italian summer, the beating sun, strong cocktails, long lounging afternoons, and then. These intense elements brew an attraction that evolves from obsession to possession and then inhabitation. It was now, quote, impossible to be Tom Ripley and be happy. He had to be somebody else. Ripley, the master shapeshifter, progresses from imposter parasite to invading host, murdering Dickie in a dinghy just off the coast. The danger of it, quote, the inevitable temporariness of it, which he vaguely realized, made him more enthusiastic, unquote. Ooh and yuck. The agony of being allowed into Tom's mind. Or is it Patricia Highsmith's? And here in this plot line, we have fallen into the hypnotic genius of her storytelling. Usually, when you think about a murder mystery, we find out who the murderer is at the end. Au contraire of that madam of the malevolent mind. We know who the murderer is, and we know who done it before the crime is committed, even before the detective is called on the case. And with no moral life preserver, we, the readers, we're compelled to read on and watch this train wreck unfold because we're hooked. This is the genius of her storytelling. Her writing isn't dramatic, it's dry, it's matter of fact, and it entices us to slip into the unsettling logic of his crimes. I can only explain her writing best to you if you think about John Malkovich and how he talks. That's all I hear when I read Highsmith. And fun fact, he's in 2 Ripley films, pictured here. Thus, we have a new man, a new life, a new leaf, with an income for life, living in Europe in Venetian splendor. Quote, he was free, he was alone, he was rich. He felt he could do anything in the world he wanted. Ugh. And we're sat there, we're left hanging with questions, like, how's he gonna pull this off? Wouldn't you have questions? I know you wouldn't read such darkness.
Let's don't even go.
Okay. But how does he evade the guilt? How does he evade the law? How does he get rid of Marge? How's he gonna beat Dickie Greenleaf? How is this possible? Highsmith, she's reading our mind. She knows that we view Tom through a moral lens, but morality plays no role in Ripley's world. Quote, Tom had never been sure he even had a conscience. We as readers, we naturally cheer on a book's hero and a desire for good to triumph evil. How can we possibly root for a book with no hero? Fascinated by evil, forever clipping crime stories from newspapers, Patricia Highsmith's storytelling does it for us. She actually admits that Ripley is a projection of her own wish fulfillment, her own alter ego. She said, quote, he was the sort of person who could do things I would never dare, unquote. And yeesh. Cindy, now that I've shared this wonderful, lighthearted story, will you enlighten us on the darkness of Caravaggio's works?
Yeah, right. The whole notion of morality is just such a huge connection between these
bizarre.
two artists.
And it's hundreds of years between them, but it's bizarre.
Yeah, about 3.
There's
no,
types.
Really.
There's types where we're not that exciting people.
That's
so these
true.
are 2 bad eggs.
Can you pop the Virgin?
I certainly can.
Death of the Virgin. There we go. No, go back. So we're going to look at one more Caravaggio, and this one is the Death of the Virgin, and it's every painting of the Virgin Mary that was painted from the 14th to the 16th century. She's viewed as the queen of heaven. And she's usually surrounded by a cadre of angels and eminent Christian, doctors of the church. Well, this work, Caravaggio's work, is an example of just how far he went in skewering an incredibly important religious scene, that of the death of Mary, and he relegated it to like the People's Choice Award Mary. He has, in fact, painted a spiritual story but instead of using perfect figures for the apostles or Mary as the queen of heaven, Mary was the queen of heaven, the star of the sea, he made them relatable to everyday people to feel as though they were part of this drama. His figures, by the way, are close to life size in this work. Supposedly, the model for the Virgin was a prostitute who had been scooped, I think I mentioned this earlier, scooped out of the River Tiber, which is why the fathers of the church refused to accept this painting when it was finished. Talk about blasphemous. The Virgin was unceremoniously laid out. Caravaggio painted her barefoot, as if that were not bad enough. She has dirty bare feet. Her feet are filthy, and that was a big time no-no. She's stiff as a board, so she's just plucked out of the river. She probably had suffered rigor mortis, had set in. Bloated stomach, messy hair, a tight, ripped red dress. She lies in a diagonal position, diagonal lines meaning more active than vertical or horizontal, and her arm extends into our space, foreshortened. Caravaggio foreshortened it. There's nothing to connote spiritual rebirth, nothing beautiful, nothing special, nothing connoting her status. There's barely a visible halo. That's it. What else can we ascertain here? The setting with the swag red drapery frames this dramatic scene, giving it a theatrical quality. The tenebrism, the chiaroscuro, I love the way that he painted, he fashioned the light on the bald heads of the apostles. It's like in a diagonal line, and it goes right to Mary's head and hands. And then you have the seated woman adjacent to Mary, whose bowed head and her neck are bent in reverence. Caravaggio has also left space for us in the foreground to join the mourners, who are really exhibiting this uncouth grief without any rhetoric. It's just simple, unadorned piety that is entirely sincere. And, by the way, I forgot to tell you one of the main points. She wasn't ascending to heaven, because that's really what the death is, it's equal to that of her son. She was treated, she's the mother of Jesus, so she gets the same death ascension as he did. So you have the naturalism, the emotional intensity, the strong contrast, and these all became distinctive hallmarks of the artist and his style. And now you were supposed to ask me, can you show how his art and style have influenced others, but that's okay, I'll say it myself.
Sorry.
Okay.
I was paying attention I was so enthralled.
Oh, enthralled, okay.
Sorry.
So, according to Fred Kleiner, who wrote Gardner's Art Through the Ages, which is a college textbook that I used when I used to teach AP Art History, Artemisia Gentileschi is considered to be one of Caravaggio's most accomplished followers, and certainly one of the most finest artists in Western art history. And this work is called Judith Slang Holofernes, 1614 to 1620. And Artemisia was born in the late 1590s, 1593 to 1653. And her father was named Orazio. They were living in Rome. Orazio Gentileschi was a friend and follower of Caravaggio. Now, Stacey asked me while we were preparing this talk, did Artemisia know Caravaggio? That would be a no. She was too young. And by the way, women were not allowed to go into men's studios by themselves, and they certainly weren't allowed to be in any kind of teaching academy, because nude men would be drawn from life. And I forgot to also mention, Caravaggio did not do any preparatory drawings. He painted right on the canvas, and he painted very quickly. So that was considered not to be, the way that was considered not to be the way that a trained artist would operate or work. So since women weren't allowed to be apprentices, Orazio taught Artemisia, and sometimes you just see her name as Artemisia. And when he recognized that she had surpassed him, he hired another painter named Agostino Tassi to be her tutor. And by the way, Artemisia was a very attractive woman. I'll just put that out there for you to marinate on. Unfortunately, Agostino Tassi was not interested in teaching her anything except, amore. And he had other ideas. Instead of teaching her, he was more interested in taking advantage of her physically, and he raped her. He promised to marry her, which at the time was considered a way to restore one's honor, but he never followed through and was later found to be already married. Nice guy. So her father pressed charges, leading to one of the most well-documented rape trials in early modern history. And in those days, the burden of proof was on the victim. Can you imagine? And so she was forced to testify. I won't go into the details because you've already told me don't go into the details, but they're not pretty. But Artemisia had to endure a 7-month trial that was very painful for her. So Tassi was found guilty, but like some people, he was so oily. He was his sentence was either shortened or never fully enforced due to his connections. But Artemisia's father forced her to marry someone she did not like and moved to Florence. But the good news is that she had a very successful career. She worked for King Charles I in England and nobles all over Italy. Like Caravaggio, she favored lights, camera, and action, and biblical heroines. Her unique perspective explains many of her choices of women overpowering men, such as the work on the screen. It comes from the book of Judith, which is included in the Catholic version of the Old Testament. Now, the story of Judith is really terrific. Judith lived in a town near Jerusalem called Bethulia. It was under siege by the Assyrian army, and by the way, the Assyrians were not the kind of people you'd want to run up against in the ancient Near East. And so this Bethulia was under siege, and the people in the town were very close to ready to surrender, when Judith, who was a beautiful woman, took herself a picnic basket and her maid and crossed the enemy lines and was able to enter Holofernes' tent, where she proceeded to ply him with alcohol and food. Or so this is how the story goes. And he became inebriated, and after that, Judith took his sword and beheaded him. And Artemisia painted the story numerous times. I've got a couple more examples to show you, but the one you see on the screen now features the moment right after the dirty deed. And like Caravaggio, you can see that the background is dark. The bodies of Judith and her maid are lit. Their arms are in that very active diagonal line. And another Caravaggio trope is the magnified violence. Nothing made him happier, I guess, than really making things as violent as possible. And of course, the attention to detail. And these are strong women, and they're in a moment of triumph. You can see how big she painted Holofernes, the general, the Assyrian general's fist against the maid's smaller face. That reinforces the drama, and look how much these women are straining. I mean, that would have been really, we can't even begin to imagine how brave they were in their action. So the drama and the straining are right out of Caravaggio's playbook. And notice how Judith's sleeves are all rolled up as she slices his neck. The blood flows everywhere and all over the place in many directions, soaking her, the knife, and of course the white sheets. It's no wonder that she is known as a Caravaggiste. She's not the only Caravaggiste. We're going to look at one more, if you switch. Another is a French artist, Georges de Latour, whose work, The Cheat with the Ace of Diamonds, is on the screen. And we can compare that with Caravaggio's earlier work, The Card Sharks. We can see that both of these paintings are snapshots of deception. In the Latour, it's set within that, tenebrism, that dark background. You see a well-dressed, naive young man on the right with a pile of gold coins in front of him. That goes to the expression my father used to say to me and my sisters all throughout our youth. Youth is wasted on the young. And he also said, a fool and her money are soon parted, which of course, my husband's sitting here. It's like, okay, dear. Anyway, the foreground figure opposite the well-dressed and feathered rube is the actual cheat with the ace of diamonds behind his back. He's duplicitous, and he wishes to engage us in this conspiracy. And oh, by the way, the other two people are his co-conspirators on the other side of the table. The woman we might call a courtesan who's showing off her low-cut bodice. And we recognize her role in this little morality play, and her maid has, of course, got the wine ready to give to the young rube. Anyway, so perhaps LiterARTure is commenting on the dangers of gambling, or wily women, or maybe the grapes of the vine. But both of these works are dramatic, and LiterARTure's is much more composed and restrained than Caravaggio's. LiterARTure's figures seem kind of pale and pasty. Maybe they've been inside too long gambling. But as opposed to Caravaggio's rosy-cheeked card sharks, the dramatic event, the LiterARTure is more still and clear. And how is LiterARTure related to the great master? Well, I've already really told you. I don't need to reinforce that. So we're moving on to the other influencers I know. Okay, neither Stacey or I really love this next artist, Lucien Freud, but it's like he really is in the 20th century a follower of Caravaggio in certain ways. So I wanted to include a few painters from the 20th century who have taken on some of the stylistic interpretation of Caravaggio, and one is this German-born British painter, Lucien Freud, who, by the way, should have gone to his grandfather for a few sessions, and maybe he wouldn't be as weird as he is, okay? And he left actually on the same train as his grandfather in 1933, escaping the Nazis. Now, I don't know about you, but his works make me feel very uncomfortable. Like Caravaggio, Freud is he's an exacting storyteller, directing his lens on what it means to be human with all of our flaws and frailties, whether his subjects, and he's painted a lot of just buck naked. I mean, they're not nude. Nude, if you say nudity, that implies some kind of grace, but naked means, warts and all. And so there's no prettifying his figures, there's just the unvarnished truth. Like Caravaggio, Lucien Freud, and he just died recently, did not use professional models, and his subjects came from all walks of life, as the Independent, the newspaper said, criminals and bookies, bankers and barons, end quote. By the way, Freud is the painter that painted the very small portrait of Queen Elizabeth, but even that, it's not her best look, and thankfully she never said anything ugly about it either, but she didn't have to. The British press raked him over the coals. But the other thing I would just say about him, and we talked a little bit about the personal life of some of these artists. There's a book written about him called Breakfast with Lucien.
I will not be reading that book.
You won't be reading it because in it they talk about the fact that he was one of the biggest womanizers of all time. He had at least 500 lovers. I mean,
more than Prince Andrew? More than Prince Andrew.
Well, maybe more than Prince Andrew. I have no idea. And he fathered about 15 children, but some of them, he had 3 wives, and he had several legitimate children, but anyway, that's for another day. So he said this about his work: my object in painting pictures is to try and move the senses by giving an intensification of reality. So intensifying reality certainly connects him to Caravaggio. So we're looking at a painting called Large Interior, Notting Hill from 1998. And it might give you pause. It definitely gave me pause, and I know it gave Stacey indigestion. But as the tilted floor and the compressed space are very off-putting, and you look at the space, which I had to put in Caravaggio to show you the way he used space in the entombment of Christ. Caravaggio has basically put us, the viewers, in the tomb with the model dead Christ figure, who's very heavy, as you can see by the gentleman who lift him up, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus. And it's in the act of showing him his dead weight, Caravaggio humanizes the figure of Christ. So that's where, within the space where the grief is contained, like Caravaggio, their bodies in Freud, not as many, but more often than not, the flesh is heavy and not idealized in what appears to be this quiet domestic space with the artist friend who is a writer reading a Penguin classic. I had to say that first, Stacey. His name is Francis Wyndham. He's reading a book. He's curled up with Pluto, the family canine, a whippet. And if we consider Wyndham's face and his hands, we see hallmarks of Lucien Freud, whose bodies have been described as landscapes. Lost in thought, Wyndham is a counterpoint to the nude male figure in the background, who is, by the way, nursing a baby. Well, not really nursing a baby, holding a baby to his breast. And if you think that's odd, you are not alone. Ironically, the original model for this work was none other than Jerry Hall, who was married to Mick Jagger at the time this was painted. She had just given birth to their fourth child. And she'd been posing for months for Lucien Freud, and then she got sick. People get sick, and they have to miss their commission, appointments. And she missed multiple sittings, and that made Freud mad. So he puts his studio assistant in the place of Jerry Hall. And he called his gallerist in New York and told him, and the gallerist went crazy. He goes, who am I going to sell this painting to? He thought Mick Jagger was supposed to buy it. Anyway, I'm really off the track of Caravaggio. I can hear my husband's voice in my ear. Get back on the track. Okay. So you can see the result, though, of the assistant's body. He's got saggy limbs. He's got lumpy flesh. Of course, a sweet baby that's probably hungry because it hasn't been fed, and nothing is idealized or romanticized similar to the entombment. Instead, the figures are painted unsparingly, forthright, and with violent brushstrokes. Okay, next.
Thank God.
Yes, thank God. Okay, one of the greatest living American artists is Kerry James Marshall. For those of you who were with us last year, we analyzed the Beauty School of Culture. If anyone happens to be going to London before January 18th, there is now an academy, an exhibition at the Royal Academy in London, which would be well worth seeing. But even though these two images are 400 years apart, we brought back David with the head of Goliath. Each of these two prominent figures, Nat Turner and the biblical hero David, are dealing with the same frightening object, that is, a severed human head. And not just any head, but the head of their mortal enemies. Kerry James Marshall turns to an actual figure from Black American history, Nat Turner, who was an enslaved preacher who brought a slave rebellion in Virginia in 1831. And here we find an upright Nat Turner staring at us from a darkened bedroom, his blackness emphasized by his uber dark body with very little light, and a room that it does seem kind of askew and tilted. He stands front and center with a disturbing facial expression. He holds a bloodied axe, which has dripped blood from the severed head of his master, whom he killed, along with the master's entire family in August of 1831, and he was by November of 1831, Nat Turner had been hung. And the master's head, as I said, was on this white scallop pillow on the bed. And compared to the victorious David, who has been turned into a reluctant symbol by Caravaggio, Marshall has turned Nat Turner into an heroic one, a figure who is strong, who dominates, and is powerful. And as you may recall from our last discussion about Kerry James Marshall, he aims to return Black history to mainstream American history. His mission is about reviving justice for all those who suffered enslavement. And for Marshall, this painting is about correcting history and a moral reckoning. Marshall's Nat Turner is a hero deserving of some moral clarity and of course, justice. And finally, we turn to British, if we can turn, thank you, to British-born New York painter Cecily Brown, whose one-woman show opened about 2 years ago at the Met. And she combines abstraction and figuration, and all the elements in her work seem to erupt into an amalgamation of tension, of beautiful colors, and dynamic brushwork. To say she uses fragmentation is an understatement. By the way, she saw the Caravaggio's Medusa when she was a little girl, and she remembers making a drawing of it. I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it. In other words, she grew up in London. Her father, she didn't know her father either until much later. Was an art-related person, David Sylvester. So think of the painting on the left as, do I have the right one? Yeah, on the left as a contemporary Vanitas work entitled Untitled Vanitas that shows a seated woman at her dressing table staring at her own reflection in a mirror. Although her face is, shall we say, blurry and distorted, and by the way, she resembles the artist's personage in this image. She wears a dark rose in her ear. Now recall that the Vanitas tradition goes back to the 17th century when the genre of still life had this important message, which was to remind one of the transience of life and the inevitability of death. That's what Vanitas is about. And that's when, in this painting, Brown encourages us to spend some extra time looking, because if we do, we will be rewarded with a completely different subject than a woman looking at herself in the mirror. Does anybody want to take a guess of what you're looking at? And you can't answer. Anybody? It's pretty obvious. Look very carefully. Does it remind you of something?
It's a skull.
Yes, it's a skull. Thank you, Elise.
Well done, Elise.
Her first time at LiterARTure. Thank you. That's very good. You get an A for the class today. So I found this Caravaggio
Of all people.
Saint Jerome, a painting of Caravaggio. He is definitely not young or attractive like the woman in Brown's painting. Instead, St. Jerome is seated at a rather simple desk. He's covered by the tools of his successful writing trade. He's bald, he's bearded, he's got skinny arms, and all of that combined to kind of reflect his his ascetic character. Although he's bathed in this gorgeous red wrap. Wouldn't it be great, ladies, to have like a gorgeous red satin wrap like that, which covers his thin, aging frame. His scrawny arm holding his writing instrument leads our eyes to this huge skull connecting Jerome to the memento mori. Remember that memento moris and Vanitas paintings are connected because objects that symbolize the transience, the inevitability of death are memento mori, just exactly what the skull is and does. So this is our clue, our lesson that Caravaggio wished to impart, that the skull was a warning or reminder that we all have a time limit on this earth. We even have a time limit today. I'm sure we've exceeded it, and you'll just have to accept our apologies. And so the time limit on this earth, even a doctor of the church who in the 4th century translated the Hebrew and Greek Bibles into Latin, and that was called the Vulgate. He wrote that, and that remained the important translation until the 1990s. He's the guy that misinterpreted rays of light into horns, which is why for so long people used to say Jews had horns. Thank you, St. Jerome. Jerome was the patron saint of scholars, and the skull is one of his symbols. Perhaps he is writing about death at the table, but we don't know. Caravaggio really gives us such a great deal to ponder in that respect. So as you can see from these few examples of the tremendous influence of the tortured Caravaggio that he had on art and art history, he was a troubled soul, no doubt. However, one who dared to challenge the norms and the religious grasp on the church by opening it up to those who may have felt excluded by its rules. He broke every one of them, and then he helped remake art for the better. So I think that what resonates about him today, as it did in the 17th century, is that he connected art and life, and he made it accessible for anybody to relate. And since he was literally discovered right around the 1950s in the Western world, he has become the subject of, I just brought a few of the books of him from my home this morning, the novels and films and biographies, and all of that indicate that the beauty he made continues to inspire us. Turn it back over to you, my dear.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I just think about how lucky your students were. Are we lucky? We're so lucky. Really
Nice.
Taking a mass market approach to things, that'd be my job. When I think about those who are influenced by Highsmith, the last thing I thought of when I did my research was that I would come up with a J. Crew catalog from 1994, but there you have it. This is supposed to be Ripley's style, and from there I learned that the 1990 film had spurred its own style that made its way into fashion, so that sprezzatura style became fashionable. Even Marge Sherwood has her own line of like pocketbooks, and I don't know if this Marge Sherwood, I don't know if it's a nod to our Ripley series, but there you have it. I don't know if anyone has any Marge Sherwood designer wear, but it comes from the book, so go figure. So just a few, I'm going to just speed through these, a few influence today of the talented Mr. Ripley on today's world.
I'm not going to say it. She won't talk about the word girl on a train or Gone Girl, so you'll just have to.
Okay, do not read these books, but they're all influenced by Highsmith. In fact, I couldn't even put the whole picture of the book cover. If you need to read about a train, do Orient Express, do 450 to Paddington, do yourself a favor, but no books with the word girl or train or Paris or society or club. Please spare me. Okay, now,
you are kind of a snob, you know that.
I am a snob, I admit. In this sense, I'm a snob. But I will tell you that if you do want to read a classic classic Highsmith, I even confuse her. Read Strangers on a Train or see the film, which is, it's okay. But anyway, it's just quintessential Highsmith, and I absolutely love it. And I love the fact that Patricia Highsmith hated this film so much. It's so fun. Then some of my very favorite characters of all time, completely, you can trace a line from Highsmith, Ripley, directly to these fabulous men, Walter White and Saul Goodman. Again, these are heroes that we admit it, you root for them. You want Saul to get away with it. Like, you want these people to win, even though they're awful. And of course, a moment of reverence for Michael Corleone, the Don, and the fabulous Mario Puzo trilogy, The Godfather. Oh my God, I love this stuff. So this is all Ripley. This is all influenced by Ripley. And of course, poor Tony. I mean, he's got
Poor Tony.
Poor Tony.
God.
You can't help those. He's got family problems, and people don't listen. The management's all wrong. He's seeing a shrink. I love this man. But how can we hate him? How can we love a New Jersey mob boss? But I
knocked
did.
so many people off.
Yes, he did. Yeah, but anyway, these are fictional, thank God. But occasionally we hear about real life Tom Ripley's, and here was one from a few years ago. I don't know if you remember reading about this woman, but how dare she? This is Anna Sorokin, a convicted criminal who landed her rear end in Rikers Island because she stole millions from friends and investors, and horrible. And it was like people were following her on Instagram during her trial because they wanted to know what she was wearing. welcome to society. Anyway, she to me is a real life Tom Ripley. So I just had to get that in there. But I want you to know this, okay? Cindy and I thought long and hard before asking you to come back for our opening program. Yay, we're so glad we're going to be together and talk about these louses, right? So we thought, what is the takeaway for today? What can you leave with, right? So the lesson is this. First of all, never meet your heroes. Okay, unless you want to be, take your life in your own hands on a tennis court, do not meet your heroes. And honestly, in all seriousness, art and literature, I'm just going to say the arts. Artists, they force us to take a look at all sides of humanity. And we must always remember, wherever there is darkness, there is light. Right? Wherever there is darkness, there is light. And we have to recognize that artists break the mold. They present strong emotions. They present us with moral conflicts. We have apprehension. We have fascination, incomprehension. This is art. And to learn from art, like Cindy said and Barry told her, you must separate. It's hard to do, but you must separate the artist from their artistic gifts, to quote very wise Mrs. Edelman. Otherwise, we would have dusty, empty bookshelves and blank museum walls. Caravaggio and Highsmith's works are groundbreaking, their lives confounding and frankly gross. But this is why we chose to present them to you today, because these are experts who broke the mold. Now, speaking of breaking news, this is Stacey Goldring reporting from JU. I have some exciting news to share with you. An anonymous donor, generous donor, has proposed a $50,000 challenge match for searching for identity. Can you imagine my reaction when I got this news? Cry. Okay, now this challenge is an extraordinary opportunity, so you need to tell everybody you know immediately and give them my phone number. If we can raise these, if I can raise $50,000, this donor will match it, unleashing $100,000 in potential. What will this do? This will propel the production of our latest documentary film project called Hope in Hiding. This will ensure that traces will be made available at more schools, more museums, here and abroad. And it will broaden our reach of our second and third gen writing workshops and more. So it is my mission, and I did the math. I have exactly 71 days from today to raise $50,000. I didn't do the division. Someone can do that for me for each day that I have to raise. But I'm asking you to join me. I'm asking you to join me in this meaningful opportunity and donate to Searching for Identity. You will be supporting our important work, honoring Holocaust remembrance, documenting survivors' stories, and providing anti-Semitism education. We all know that this work grows in urgency every single day. And with your support, I know we can reach this goal. So on your way out, you'll find our grant writer, Christy Kohler, and a very smart person who has been in the nonprofits for a long time, said, Stacey, you need to ask. You need to ask. So that's what I'm doing today. You're all my witness, because it's not easy to do, but I'm doing it. And Christy can talk with you about the myriad of ways that you can contribute to Searching for Identity and join me on this mission. And I even bought $100,000 bars, just subliminal, take a candy. There's multiple zeros. It's very exciting. So we want to thank you. I didn't mean to commandeer the whole thing, but I did, didn't I? I'm so sorry. No.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay.
Anyway, I just had to
I'm so proud of you. You
I feel very tall. I feel very tall. So I just thank you, and thank you for coming. And guess what? It's not all darkness, and I'll tell you why. Because I remembered to clip on the last page when I left the house. Okay, when we meet again on February 11th, right? Oh, you thought I was going to forget. I thought you were going to forget. No, I didn't. We're going to do two things. First of all, I'm going to let you know we met the match, okay? And then we're going to present a very steamy topic. Love Crush. Love Crush tells about the heated passion and dramatic rivalry between Picasso and Matisse. And then...
Well, but it's not like they had a thing going. I mean, the way you present it makes it sound like Love Crush that they had. Well,
she's already arguing with me.
Oh,
she's
God.
done no research. I've done no research. I'm just trying to keep in the time.
Okay.
All right, so, and then more steamy entanglement follows with my take on A.S. Bayet's Booker-winning prize-winning book, Possession. I mean, how much more can you handle? We'll all have the vapors when we're done. So only here at LitArt can you enjoy connections with one another, new and old, thanks to our mutual love of lifelong learning. We wish you wonderful fall days ahead, full of art, literature, laughter, and love. Thank you.
Thank you.